The boarding area of Gate K-19 descended into a hushed, suffocating silence. A veteran airport police officer had a black woman backed against the glass concourse wall, his hand hovering over his cuffs, accusing her of faking a high-level security badge. He smirked, announcing to the whispering crowd that she was a fraud trying to bypass airport security. What he didn't know was that the 300 passengers behind him were relying entirely on her, the airline's senior systems engineer, to keep their transcontinental flight from falling out of the sky. Here is exactly how her ultimate revenge unfolded. The sleet was coming down in sideways sheets against the massive plate glass windows of Chicago O'Hare International Airport. It was a miserable Tuesday evening in late November, the kind of weather that turned the country's busiest aviation hub into a logistical nightmare. For Maya Reynolds, however, the weather was the least of her concerns. Maya was a senior avionics and systems engineer for one of the world's largest commercial airlines. At 32, she was one of the youngest people in her department, and as a black woman in a heavily male-dominated, old-school industry, she was a rarity. She had spent the last decade earning her stripes, moving from regional jets in dusty hangars to diagnosing complex catastrophic system failures on heavy, wide-body aircraft. She held clearance levels that allowed her onto any active runway, tarmac, or secure zone in the airport. Her badge, a red-striped security identification display area, SIDA credential, was her golden ticket, hard-earned and meticulously maintained. At 6:15 p.m., Maya's secure company radio crackled to life. It was Richard Hayes, the shift supervisor at the Maintenance Operations Center. "Maya, we've got a critical AOG situation at Gate K-19. Richard's voice was tense, the background noise of the control room buzzing behind him. AOG meant aircraft on ground, a grounded plane that was bleeding money by the second. Flight 492 to Frankfurt, a Boeing 777-300R. The captain is seeing an erratic fault in the right engine's electronic engine control, and there's a corresponding pneumatic pressure drop in the auxiliary power unit. We have 340 passengers loaded, and they are 45 minutes away from timing out the crew. If we don't clear this fault, the flight is cancelled. The crew turns into pumpkins, and we have to put 300 people in hotels." "I'm on it," Maya said, already grabbing her specialized diagnostic laptop and her heavy canvas tool bag. "I was just finishing up paperwork in the Terminal 2 break room. I can be at K-19 in 10 minutes. "Run, Maya," Richard urged. "Captain Pendleton is losing his mind up there, and dispatch is breathing down my neck." Maya sprinted out of the break room. She was dressed for the tarmac, heavy steel-toed boots, dark navy cargo pants reinforced at the knees, and a high-visibility reflective vest over her thick winter jacket. Her SIDA badge was clipped securely to her front pocket, clearly visible, displaying her photo, her name, and the large, bold letters authorizing her access to the sterile and secure areas of the airport. Navigating O'Hare during a weather delay was like trying to run through a mosh pit. Passengers were sprawled across the floor, eating fast food, sleeping on their luggage, and arguing with gate agents. Maya dodged and weaved, her heavy tool bag thumping rhythmically against her hip. The urgency of the situation pushed her forward. A cancelled international wide-body flight was a multi-$100,000 loss for the airline, not to mention the massive disruption to hundreds of lives. She knew exactly what the EEC fault was. She had seen it before on this specific airframe. It was a sensor calibration error combined with a sticky bleed air valve. A quick manual override, a software reset from the avionics bay beneath the cockpit, and a visual inspection of the valve would clear the code and get the plane in the air. As she approached the K concourse, The crowd thickened. Gate K-19 was at the very end of the terminal. Maya saw the massive nose of the Boeing 777 pressed up against the glass, the jet bridge attached like an umbilical cord. The boarding area was absolute chaos. Passengers were pacing, babies were crying, and the gate agents looked like they were ready to surrender. To get to the aircraft's avionics bay, Maya didn't need to go down the jet bridge. She needed to access the secure tarmac door located just to the right of the gate desk. It was a heavy steel door marked Restricted Area, authorized personnel only. Maya bypassed the massive line of frustrated passengers waiting to ask the gate agents about their connections. She cut straight across the boarding lanes, pulling her SIDA badge up to tap it against the electronic card reader beside the steel door. Before the plastic of her badge could even touch the reader, a heavy, gloved hand clamped down on her shoulder, gripping her with a startling, painful force. Maya gasped, stumbling backward, the weight of her tool bag nearly pulling her off balance. She spun around to see a Port Authority airport police officer glaring down at her. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, his uniform immaculately pressed, a radio mic clipped to his shoulder. His nameplate read B. Jenkins. "Just where do you think you're going?" Officer Bradley Jenkins demanded, his voice a low, authoritative bark that immediately turned the heads of the nearest dozen passengers. "I am accessing the tarmac, officer," Maya said, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. She instinctively tapped her SIDA badge. "I'm the systems engineer for this airline. We have an AOG emergency on Flight 492. Jenkins didn't even look at her badge. His eyes swept up and down her frame, taking in her young face, her natural hair pulled back into a tight bun, and the heavy canvas bag slung over her shoulder. His expression contorted into a smirk of absolute disbelief. "An engineer," Jenkins repeated, the word dripping with sarcasm. "Right, and I'm the CEO of the airline. Step away from the secure door, miss." Now Maya's mind raced. The clock was ticking. "Officer Jenkins, I don't have time for a misunderstanding. This aircraft is grounded with an engine control fault. I am the only certified avionics engineer on this concourse who can clear it. If I am not under that plane in the next 5 minutes, this flight will be cancelled." Jenkins crossed his arms over his chest, moving his substantial bulk to block the card reader entirely. "You expect me to believe a girl like you is a senior mechanic on a $70 million jet? You don't look like any airline mechanic I've ever seen. I am an engineer, not just a mechanic, and I have the credentials to prove it," Maya said, her tone hardening. She unclipped her SIDA badge and held it up right in front of his face. "Look at the badge. Look at the hologram. It's a red stripe clearance. Scan it if you need to, but let me through." Jenkins snatched the badge out of her hand. The sudden, aggressive movement made Maya flinch. Taking a credential from an employee without cause was a direct violation of airport security protocols, but Jenkins acted as if he owned the terminal. He squinted at the badge, turning it over in his hands, scraping his thumbnail against the edge of the plastic, as if trying to peel it apart. "Anybody can print a fake ID in their basement these days," Jenkins said, stepping closer, invading her personal space. "People get desperate when they miss their flights. Or maybe you're trying to bypass security to steal something from the baggage carts. I've seen it all. Are you out of your mind?" Maya demanded, her voice raising just a fraction, echoing slightly in the sudden quiet that had fallen over the boarding area. Passengers were actively watching now. "I am on the clock. My supervisor dispatched me here. Call the operations center. Call Richard Hayes." "Lower your voice when you speak to me," Jenkins snapped, his hand dropping to rest intimidatingly on his duty belt. "You are in a restricted zone, carrying an oversized bag, presenting a suspicious ID, and causing a disturbance. You're not going anywhere near that tarmac. The digital clock above the gate desk read 6:28 p.m. 17 minutes left before the flight crew timed out. Maya felt a cold sweat prickle the back of her neck. The sheer absurdity of the situation was entirely overshadowed by the professional disaster unfolding. "Officer, please listen to me," Maya said, forcing her voice into a calm, de-escalating register. She knew all too well how situations like this could spiral for a black woman. If she raised her voice, she was aggressive. If she defended herself, she was resisting. She had to play the game, even while the airline's money and hundreds of passengers' plans burned to the ground around her. "I have a highly specialized toolkit in this bag. I have a diagnostic laptop. The gate agent right there can verify who I am." Maya pointed toward the gate desk, where a young, frantic gate agent named Timothy Gallagher was frantically typing on his keyboard. Timothy looked up, his eyes widening as he saw Maya being cornered by the police officer. "Timothy," Maya called out, "tell this officer who I am. Tell him Operation sent me to clear the EEC fault." Timothy hesitated. He was barely 23, wearing a slightly oversized airline blazer and clearly terrified of authority. He looked from Maya to Officer Jenkins, swallowing hard. Officer, we are waiting on an engineer. Is this the engineer you normally see?" Jenkins interrupted, pointing a thick finger at Maya. "Do you personally know this woman?" I don't know her personally," Timothy stammered, shrinking under Jenkins' intense glare. "But if she has the badge—" "Her badge is under investigation," Jenkins declared loudly, ensuring the growing crowd of onlookers heard him. He turned back to Maya, a triumphant sneer on his face. "See, he doesn't know you. You don't match the profile of aviation maintenance staff. You look like a passenger trying to pull a fast one to get onto the tarmac." "I don't match the profile," Maya repeated, the blatant prejudice in his words hitting her like a physical blow. "What profile is that, officer? The fact that I'm a woman? Or the fact that I'm black? Because my badge is federally issued, background checked by the FBI and the FAA, and gives me more clearance in this airport than you have." Jenkins' face flushed a deep, angry red. His ego had been bruised, and the mask of procedural duty slipped, revealing the raw, arrogant bias beneath. "That's it," Jenkins hissed. He unclipped his radio microphone from his shoulder. "Dispatch, this is Officer Jenkins. I need backup at Gate K19. I have a female suspect, possible trespasser, presenting fraudulent federal credentials and becoming combative." Combative? Maya was incredulous. The injustice was suffocating. "I am standing completely still. My hands are at my sides." A murmur ripped through the crowd of passengers. A few people pulled out their cell phones, the small red recording lights clicking on. Maya felt a sickening wave of humiliation wash over her. She had worked her entire life to reach the pinnacle of her career. She had graduated at the top of her aerospace engineering class. She was the one the airline called when no one else could figure out why a multi-million-dollar machine wouldn't fly. And now she was being treated like a common criminal in front of 300 people, solely because a fragile, prejudiced cop couldn't fathom that a young black woman was smarter and more qualified than he was. "Put the bag on the ground," Jenkins ordered, pointing at her tool bag. "No," Maya said firmly. "That bag contains sensitive calibration equipment worth more than your yearly salary. If it is mishandled, it has to be sent back to Boeing for recalibration." "I said, put the bag on the ground, or I will put you on the ground and take it myself," Jenkins threatened, taking a heavy step forward, closing the distance until he was inches from her face. Maya carefully lowered the bag to the carpeted floor. The digital clock ticked to 6:32 p.m. 13 minutes. "Open it," Jenkins commanded. Maya knelt down and unzipped the heavy canvas. Inside were specialized titanium wrenches, a digital multimeter, a pneumatic pressure gauge, and her hardened Panasonic Toughbook laptop. Jenkins kicked the side of the bag with his boot, rattling the expensive equipment. Looks like a bunch of junk to me. Could be weapons. Could be anything. It's an aviation maintenance kit, Maya said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. Officer Jenkins, I am begging you to call Richard Hayes at the operations center, or call the pilot of this aircraft. Captain Pendleton is sitting in the left seat of that cockpit right now, waiting for me. If you don't let me fix that plane, Flight 492 is going to be cancelled, and I will personally make sure the airline's legal department holds you liable for the financial loss. Are you threatening a law enforcement officer? Jenkins asked softly, a dangerous glint in his eye. Because I can arrest you right now for terroristic threats and impersonating aviation personnel. You think your little fake badge scares me? I've been working this airport for 15 years. I know who belongs here and who doesn't. Maya stood up slowly, locking eyes with Jenkins. She realized then that this was never about security. It was about power. Jenkins had made a snap judgment based on her race and gender, and now, rather than admit he was wrong, he was willing to burn everything down to prove he was in charge. You don't know anything, Maya said, her voice dropping to a dead, icy calm. You are making the biggest mistake of your career. Just then, the crowd parted slightly as a second Port Authority officer jogged up to the gate. He was younger, looking slightly breathless. His name tag read Miller. What's the situation, Brad? Officer Miller asked, looking from Jenkins to Maya, then down to the open tool bag. Caught this one trying to breach the tarmac door, Jenkins said, holding up Maya's badge like a trophy. Handed me a fake SIDA badge. Got a bag full of heavy tools. She's getting aggressive. It is not fake, Maya said, looking at Miller, hoping for a shred of sanity. Officer Miller, scan the badge. Look at the barcode on the back. Run my name in your system. Maya Reynolds, Senior Systems Engineer. Miller hesitated, reaching for the badge. Let me just run the barcode, Brad. Standard protocol. I don't need you to tell me how to do my job, Miller. Jenkins snapped, pulling the badge away. She's lying. Look at her. She's just trying to cause a scene. The clock hit 6:35 p.m. 10 minutes until the crew timed out. The flight was effectively dead. Maya closed her eyes for a brief second, mourning the loss of the flight, the disruption to the passengers, and the sheer indignity of the moment. She opened her eyes, resolving that if Jenkins was going to ruin this flight, she was going to ensure he went down with it. Excuse me, what is going on here? A sharp, authoritative voice cut through the tension. The crowd of passengers at the gate parted like the Red Sea. Striding up the jet bridge and out into the terminal was Captain Arthur Pendleton. Pendleton was a towering figure in his late 50s, with silver hair, sharp features, and the distinct, crisp navy blue uniform of a senior airline captain, complete with 4 gold stripes on his sleeves. He looked furious. Behind him trailed the first officer, looking equally stressed. Captain Pendleton marched straight up to the gate desk. Timothy, where is my engineer? Operations told me Maya was on her way 20 minutes ago. My crew is about to time out. The APU is throwing a low-pressure warning, and I have 300 passengers turning mutinous in my cabin. Why is my plane not being serviced? Timothy, looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole, raised a trembling finger and pointed over the desk toward the wall, where Maya was currently flanked by the 2 police officers. Captain Pendleton turned, his eyes scanning the scene. When he saw Maya, his expression shifted from anger to sheer confusion, and then to a dark, simmering outrage. Maya, Pendleton said, pushing his way past the bewildered passengers. What in God's name are you doing standing out here? The engine control unit is completely locked up. I've been trying to get to you, Captain, Maya said, her voice clear and carrying across the silent crowd. But Officer Jenkins here has confiscated my security badge, accused me of forging federal credentials, and threatened to arrest me for impersonating an engineer. Captain Pendleton stopped dead in his tracks. He looked at Officer Jenkins, who was suddenly looking slightly less confident, though his jaw remained stubbornly set. "You did what?" Pendleton demanded, his voice dropping an octave, possessing the kind of command presence that only comes from decades of commanding heavy aircraft. "Captain," Jenkins said, puffing out his chest, trying to maintain his authority, "this woman was attempting to access a secure, restricted area. She does not fit the profile of authorized maintenance personnel, and her ID is highly suspicious. We are conducting an investigation. She doesn't fit the profile," Pendleton repeated, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Officer, Maya Reynolds is the senior avionics engineer for this entire hub. She literally wrote the diagnostic protocol for the Boeing 787 and 777 electrical systems that the airline uses nationwide. She is the only reason my aircraft hasn't been grounded permanently." The crowd of passengers gasped. The whispers turned into loud murmurs of indignation. People who had been frustrated with the airline a moment ago were suddenly directing their fury at the police officer. "Sir, with all due respect, I know airport security better than," Jenkins started. "You don't know a damn thing," Pendleton roared, stepping so close to Jenkins that the officer actually took a step back. "Hand her the badge, right now. You are delaying a federally regulated commercial flight. You are harassing my crew, and you are jeopardizing the safety and schedule of 340 souls." Officer Miller, the younger cop, reached over and snatched the badge from Jenkins' hand. He quickly scanned the barcode with his handheld terminal. The terminal immediately beeped, flashing a bright green light and displaying Maya's photo, her credentials, and her active, high-level clearance status. "Brad, it's real," Miller whispered, his face going pale. "She's cleared for everything. Tarmac avionics, the works, active duty." Jenkins stared at the green light on the scanner, his mind struggling to process the reality that his absolute certainty, rooted entirely in his own prejudice, was entirely wrong. But instead of apologizing, his pride took over. "Fine," Jenkins grunted, trying to save face. "She can go," but she was being insubordinate and uncooperative. "I'm writing a report." "You're going to do a lot more than write a report, officer," Maya said, her voice cutting like a razor. She stepped forward, reclaiming her badge from Miller and clipping it back onto her vest. She hoisted her heavy tool bag onto her shoulder. "Captain, what is the exact time?" Pendleton checked his heavy aviator watch. 6:38. "We have 7 minutes before the flight crew legally times out under FAA regulations. If we don't clear the fault and push back from this gate in 7 minutes, the flight is dead." Maya looked at Jenkins, a cold fire in her eyes. "Officer Jenkins, because of your investigation, this flight is about to be cancelled. Do you know how much it costs to re-accommodate 340 passengers on international flights? How much it costs to ground a Boeing 777 overnight? It's north of $250,000. And I am going to make sure that the airline's legal team, the FAA, and the Port Authority know that you personally caused it, because you didn't think a black woman could be an engineer." Jenkins swallowed hard, the magnitude of the financial and professional disaster finally dawning on him. The passengers around them were now actively shouting, booing the officer, holding their phones up to record his face. "Captain," Maya said, turning her back on the cops entirely, "get back to the cockpit. Power up the diagnostic relay." I need 3 minutes in the avionics bay to manually override the bleed air valve and reboot the EEC. We are going to make this flight. You heard the engineer. Pendleton shouted to his first officer, turning on his heel and sprinting back down the jet bridge. Maya didn't look back. She tapped her badge against the card reader. It beeped cheerfully, the heavy steel door unlocking with a loud clack. She pushed through, descending the concrete stairs into the freezing, sleet-filled night of the tarmac. The roar of the jet engines outside was deafening, a chaotic symphony of power and machinery. She had less than 5 minutes to do a job that usually took 20. The cold air hit her face, but she felt nothing but pure adrenaline. She had a plane to fix, a crew to save, and an arrogant cop's career to dismantle piece by piece. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind Maya, cutting off the heated, stagnant air of the terminal and plunging her into the freezing, chaotic world of the O'Hare tarmac. The sleet was a blinding mix of rain and ice, stinging her cheeks like tiny needles. The roar of the auxiliary power units from half a dozen wide-bodied jets created a deafening, bone-rattling vibration that pulsed through the concrete. Maya sprinted across the slick tarmac, her heavy steel-toed boots finding purchase despite the ice. Ahead of her loomed the massive silhouette of Flight 492, a Boeing 777-300ER, its anti-collision beacons flashing brilliant red against the dark, stormy sky. The ground crew was standing by, huddled in their oversized parkas, holding the glowing orange marshalling wands. They looked frantic. They knew the clock was ticking down to a catastrophic operational failure. "Where have you been?" screamed a ramp manager, a burly man named Greg, his voice barely carrying over the jet engine noise. "We are less than 4 minutes from crew timeout. Police delay." Maya shouted back, not breaking her stride. She ducked under the massive, sweeping curve of the fuselage, heading straight for the belly of the beast. Directly aft of the nose landing gear was the access hatch to the EE bay, the main equipment center. It was the electronic brain of the 777, a cramped, heavily wired compartment housing the main computers, avionics, and flight control systems. Maya slammed her palm against the exterior latch, twisted the heavy handle, and popped the hatch open. She hoisted her heavy canvas tool bag up and hauled herself into the belly of the aircraft. The EE bay was intensely warm, smelling of ozone, heated circuit boards, and aviation hydraulic fluid. The compartment was lined floor-to-ceiling with black metallic racks, holding hundreds of blinking line-replaceable units, LRUs. Maya didn't waste a millisecond. She jammed her headset over her ears, plugging the long, coiled cord into the maintenance intercom jack on the bulkhead. "Flight deck, this is maintenance," Maya said, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Maya, thank God!" Captain Pendleton's voice crackled into her headset, sounding incredibly tense. "We are at 6:41 p.m. 4 minutes. The right engine electronic engine control is throwing a hard fail, and the APU bleed air duct pressure is dropping into the red. We can't start the main engines with this low pressure." "I know, Captain," Maya said, rapidly unzipping her bag and pulling out her Panasonic Toughbook. She grabbed a thick data cable and jammed it into the Central Maintenance Computing System, CMCS port on the main rack. "I suspect a mechanical bind in the APU bleed isolation valve, which is throwing a cascading software fault to the EEC. Give me control of the pneumatic system." "You have control," Pendleton confirmed. "Do it fast, Maya. Dispatch is already typing up the cancellation notice." Maya's fingers flew across the ruggedized keyboard of her laptop. Lines of diagnostic code streamed across the screen. She ran a rapid built-in test equipment. Byte check on the right engine controller. The screen flashed amber. Fault. Valve position sensor, MIC. It's a sticky valve. Maya muttered to herself. She unbuckled her safety harness and squeezed through the narrow aisle of the EE bay, moving toward the pneumatic control manifolds. She pulled a specialized, long-handled titanium wrench from her bag. This was where the textbook ended and real-world engineering began. Sometimes, software couldn't fix hardware that was frozen by the bitter Chicago weather and sheer mechanical stubbornness. "Captain, I'm bypassing the digital lockout. I'm going to manually stroke the bleed valve open. When I tell you, hit the APU bleed switch to on and be ready for a pressure spike." "Standing by, Maya." 2.5 minutes. Maya reached up into the maze of high-temperature titanium ducting. She found the pneumatic isolation valve. It was stuck halfway closed, the actuator arm frozen in place. She locked the titanium wrench onto the manual override nut. It wouldn't budge. The ambient cold from the fuselage exterior was fighting her. She braced her boots against the structural frame of the bay, gripped the wrench with both hands, and put every ounce of her body weight into it. Her muscles screamed, her knuckles turning white. "Come on!" She gritted her teeth, sweat beading on her forehead, despite the chill creeping in from the open hatch below. "Move, you stubborn piece of metal." With a loud, metallic crack that echoed in the small bay, the frozen actuator broke free. Maya rapidly cranked the wrench, manually forcing the heavy butterfly valve into the fully open position. "Now, Captain, hit the bleed switch." Maya yelled into her headset. Instantly, the deafening rush of high-pressure air screamed through the titanium ducts beside her head. The manifold vibrated violently. Maya scrambled back to her laptop. The amber fault lines on her screen flickered, vanished, and were replaced by a glorious, solid wall of green text. The pressure gauges on her software spiked perfectly into the operational zone. The EEC fault cleared entirely. "Flight deck, I am showing green across the board," Maya reported, slamming her laptop shut. "APU bleed pressure is nominal. Right engine EEC is fully online. You are cleared for main engine start." "I see it. We have green lights," Captain Pendleton shouted, the relief in his voice palpable. "Maya, you are an absolute lifesaver." "What's the time?" Maya checked her phone. 6:44 p.m. "You have 60 seconds until crew timeout, Captain," Maya said, rapidly shoving her gear back into her canvas bag. "Drop the parking brake and tell the tug to push you back immediately. Closing doors now." "Get out of there, Maya." Maya didn't need to be told twice. She dropped down through the EE bay hatch, hitting the icy tarmac just as the massive jet engines began their initial, low-pitched whine of startup. She slammed the access hatch shut, securing the heavy exterior latches. She grabbed her bag and sprinted away from the aircraft, seeking the safety of the painted red clearance lines. She turned just in time to see the heavy pushback tractor throttle up, shoving the 700,000-pound aircraft backward away from gate K-19. The ground crew cheered, pumping their illuminated wands into the air. Maya stood in the freezing sleet, her chest heaving, watching the massive Boeing 777 rotate on the taxiway. She had done it. Against the weather, against the mechanical failure, and against a prejudiced police officer who had tried to sabotage her. She had saved a multi-million-dollar asset and the holidays for 340 passengers. But as the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by the biting cold and a deep, simmering fury, Maya realized her night was far from over. Officer Bradley Jenkins was still inside the terminal, and it was time to make sure he understood exactly what he had almost destroyed. When Maya walked back up the concrete stairs and pushed through the heavy steel door into the terminal, the atmosphere had drastically shifted. The gate area, previously packed with 300 frantic passengers, was now eerily empty a testament to her successful fix. Flight 492 was gone, safely taxiing to the runway. However, the boarding area was not entirely deserted. Standing near the gate desk were 4 people, and the tension radiating from them was thick enough to cut with a knife. Officer Bradley Jenkins was standing rigidly, his face pale and sweating. Next to him was his younger partner, Officer Miller, who was staring fixedly at the floor. Confronting them was a tall, imposing woman in a crisp Port Authority police captain's uniform, Captain Brenda Hollis. Beside her stood Richard Hayes, Maya's shift supervisor from the Maintenance Operations Center, looking like he was ready to commit a felony. As the heavy steel door clicked shut behind Maya, all 4 heads snapped in her direction. Maya, Richard exhaled, stepping forward to clasp her shoulder. Dispatch just confirmed 492 is airborne. Pendleton called it indirectly. He told me everything that happened. Are you all right? I'm fine, Richard, Maya said, her voice steady and icy cold. She dropped her heavy tool bag onto the carpet with a loud thud, deliberately locking her eyes onto Officer Jenkins. But we need to have a serious conversation about the security breach that just occurred. That's exactly what we are doing, Ms. Reynolds. Captain Hollis stepped forward. She possessed a severe, no-nonsense demeanor. I am Captain Hollis, Port Authority Police. Officer Jenkins' radio call for backup over a combative trespasser with forged federal credentials triggered a high-level response. By the time I arrived, Captain Pendleton had already briefed the tower, and half this terminal was screaming at my officers. Jenkins cleared his throat, attempting to salvage the shattered remnants of his authority. Captain Hollis, I was strictly following TSA and Port Authority protocol. The suspect, he caught himself as Hollis glared at him. Miss Reynolds approached a restricted access door with an oversized bag. She did not match the physical profile of heavy maintenance personnel. It is my duty to verify. Physical profile? Maya interrupted, taking a step toward Jenkins, the sheer force of her presence making the larger man flinch. Let's be very clear about what you mean by physical profile, Officer Jenkins. You mean a young black woman, because when I presented a federally issued biometric SIDA badge, a badge that grants me access to areas of this airport that you aren't even cleared to look at, you didn't scan it. You confiscated it. You mocked me. You tried to provoke me into an altercation. That is a severe mischaracterization of events. Jenkins protested, his voice raising. I am a 15-year veteran of this airport. Then you should know how to read a badge, Richard Hayes snarled, stepping up beside Maya. Because of your veteran intuition, you delayed an active AOG recovery. Do you have any idea what Maya just did down there? She bypassed a mechanical lockout on a high-pressure pneumatic valve. If she hadn't cleared that fault, and that plane had taken off, the bleed air duct could have ruptured at 30,000 feet, causing a catastrophic depressurization of the engine nacelle. Jenkins blanched. He was a cop, not an aerospace engineer, but the words catastrophic depressurization carried a universal weight. I was protecting the aircraft, Jenkins stammered. You were protecting your own ego, Maya shot back. She turned to Captain Hollis. Captain, I have a job to do, and I don't have time to be racially profiled while doing it. The delay, Officer Jenkins, caused put Flight 492 within 60 seconds of a legal crew timeout. If I had been 1 minute slower, my airline would be out over $250,000 in hotel vouchers, rebooking fees, and grounded asset costs. And I assure you, our corporate legal department would have subpoenaed Officer Jenkins personally for the damages. Captain Hollis's jaw tightened. She looked at Jenkins with absolute disgust. Is this true, Jenkins? You didn't scan her badge immediately? I was inspecting it visually first. It looked fake to me. The lamination, "I scanned it, Captain." Officer Miller spoke up quietly, stepping away from his partner. "When I got here," Brad was holding her badge, "I took it and scanned it. It came back green immediately. Active high-level clearance." Jenkins whipped his head around to stare at his partner. "Miller, whose side are you on?" "The side that doesn't want to get sued into oblivion by a multinational airline, Brad," Miller replied, shaking his head. "She told you who she was. The pilot told you who she was. You wouldn't listen." "Not only that," Richard Hayes added, pulling out his company tablet and tapping the screen. "We have the security footage from the gate cameras, and we also have 3 different videos sent to our social media team by passengers who were at this gate. You are all over Twitter right now, Officer Jenkins. The passengers filmed you threatening to arrest our chief systems engineer for doing her job." Jenkins' shoulders slumped. The arrogant sneer that had been plastered on his face just 30 minutes ago was completely gone, replaced by the hollow, terrified look of a man watching his career evaporate. "Officer Jenkins," Captain Hollis said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I have warned you before about your random security checks targeting minority employees in this terminal. You have been written up twice for harassment of baggage handlers, but deciding to play cowboy with a senior aviation engineer during a flight emergency? You have crossed a line you cannot walk back from." Hollis held out her hand, badge and gun. Now, Jenkins stared at her in shock. "Captain, you can't be serious. I have a pension." "I said badge and gun, Bradley," Hollis barked, her hand still outstretched. "You are stripped of police powers and suspended without pay, pending a full internal affairs investigation. You are a liability to this department and a threat to airport operations." With trembling hands, Jenkins unclipped his radio, unbuckled his duty belt, and handed over his sidearm and his gold shield. The metallic clinking sound echoed loudly in the quiet, empty gate area. "Officer Miller, escort Mr. Jenkins to the precinct. Clean out his locker, take his airport ID, and escort him to the employee parking lot. He is no longer permitted on Port Authority property without an escort," Hollis commanded. Miller nodded, taking the belt and badge. "Let's go, Brad." Jenkins didn't look at Maya as he turned to leave. He looked utterly defeated, a small, petty man who had finally picked a fight with someone entirely out of his league. As he walked away, his head hung low. The heavy silence in the terminal felt like justice. Captain Hollis turned back to Maya and Richard, her rigid posture softening just a fraction. "Mrs. Reynolds, Mr. Hayes. On behalf of the Port Authority Police Department, I sincerely apologize. This is not the standard of conduct we uphold. I will be personally handling this investigation, and I will be contacting your legal department in the morning to provide a full report." "Thank you, Captain," Maya said, her posture finally relaxing, the exhaustion of the physical repair and the emotional confrontation washing over her simultaneously. "I appreciate your swift action. You did incredible work tonight, Miss Reynolds," Hollis said, offering a firm handshake. "It takes a lot of composure to handle a crisis under that kind of pressure. The airline is lucky to have you." As Captain Hollis walked away, Richard let out a long, low whistle. "Maya," Richard said, looking at her with a mixture of awe and immense respect. "I've been in this business for 25 years, and I have never seen anyone handle an AOG crisis and a rogue cop in the same hour without breaking a sweat." "I broke a sweat, Richard," Maya smiled faintly, gesturing to her damp forehead. That bleed valve was stuck solid. "Well, you're off the clock," Richard said, picking up her heavy canvas tool bag for her. "I'm buying you dinner, and tomorrow, the director of maintenance is going to want to hear this story firsthand. You might just get a promotion out of this nightmare." Maya looked out the massive plate glass window of the terminal. The sleet was still coming down, But far out on the runway, she saw the blinking strobe lights of a Boeing 777 accelerating down the tarmac, lifting off into the dark sky, carrying 340 people safely toward Frankfurt. She had done her job, she had proven her worth, and she had made sure that a bully with a badge would never stand in her way or anyone else's ever again. The morning after the ice storm, Maya Reynolds woke up to a phone that was so overheated from notifications it practically burned her hand. She sat up in bed, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, and tapped open her news feed. She expected to see a standard internal company memo about the delay of Flight 492. Instead, her own face was staring back at her on the front page of a major national news aggregator. A passenger, a young woman named Chloe Davis, who had been sitting right at the glass near gate K19, had recorded the entire 15-minute altercation in high-definition video. She had uploaded it to social media at 1 a.m. By 8:10 a.m., it had amassed 22 million views. The internet had done what the internet does best. It went to war. The video captured Officer Bradley Jenkins in all his arrogant, prejudiced glory. The audio was crystal clear. Every condescending remark, every threat of arrest, and his blatant refusal to look at Maya's federally issued SIDA badge was broadcast to the world. Viewers watched in collective outrage as a highly qualified black female engineer was treated like a shoplifter while trying to save a multi-million-dollar international flight. The hashtag #FireJenkins was the #1 trending topic worldwide. Before Maya could even process the sheer scale of the viral explosion, her phone rang. It was Richard Hayes. "Maya," Richard said, his voice unusually formal. "Do not come to the maintenance hangar today. Put on a suit. You are requested at the corporate headquarters downtown. Floor 52, the executive boardroom." Floor 52 was where the C-suite executives lived. It was a world of polished mahogany, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the Chicago skyline, and billion-dollar decisions. 2 hours later, Maya walked out of the elevator, her heavy tarmac boots swapped for sleek heels, her reflective vest replaced by a sharp charcoal blazer. She was ushered into a massive boardroom by an executive assistant. Sitting around the long table were the heavyweights of the airline: Thomas Granger, the director of maintenance; Harrison Cole, the vice president of operations; and a team of 4 sharp-suited corporate attorneys. On the massive flat-screen television at the end of the room, the video of Maya and Officer Jenkins was playing on a loop, paused right on Jenkins' sneering face. "Have a seat, Maya," Harrison Cole said, gesturing to a plush leather chair at the center of the table. He was a ruthless, numbers-driven executive who rarely smiled, but today he looked at Maya with an expression of profound respect. "We've been reviewing the telemetry data from Flight 492, the gate security footage, and the passenger videos," Thomas Granger started, leaning forward and folding his hands. "First and foremost, Maya, your bypass of the pneumatic isolation valve was textbook perfection under immense duress. You saved this airline $280,000 in immediate grounding costs, and you prevented a massive logistical nightmare. The entire executive board thanks you." "Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job," Maya replied smoothly. "You did your job while being subjected to egregious, actionable harassment," Harrison Cole interrupted, his voice hardening as he pointed a remote at the frozen image of Jenkins. "This officer did not just insult you. He insulted this airline. He jeopardized the safety of our aircraft. And he delayed a federally regulated commercial flight based entirely on his own racial bias." The lead corporate attorney, an older woman with sharp eyes, slid a thick manila folder across the table toward Maya. "Mrs. Reynolds, We want you to know that the airline is standing behind you unequivocally, the attorney said. We have already drafted a formal legal complaint against the Port Authority and the city. We are suing them for tortious interference with our business operations, and we are backing up Captain Brenda Hollis's internal investigation to ensure Bradley Jenkins never wears a badge again. Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had worried, briefly, that the airline might try to sweep it under the rug to avoid a PR battle with the airport police. Instead, they were going to war on her behalf. Furthermore, Harrison continued, a rare, genuine smile crossing his face. Thomas is retiring next year. We need a new director of line maintenance for the entire North American wide-body fleet. It is an executive-level position. We want you to start shadowing him immediately. We need leaders who don't break under pressure. Maya's breath hitched. That was a promotion that usually took 20 years to achieve. She had just earned it in a single freezing night on the tarmac. But as the boardroom erupted into polite applause, Maya's phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. She glanced down and her blood ran cold. Bradley Jenkins wasn't going down without a fight. Despite being suspended and stripped of his badge, Bradley Jenkins had spent his morning making incredibly foolish decisions. Refusing to accept responsibility, he had hired a sleazy, aggressive union lawyer and immediately went on a fringe, right-wing morning talk show to spin his own narrative. Sitting in a cheap studio, looking red-faced and defensive, Jenkins blatantly lied to the camera. I was doing my job to protect the American public, Jenkins declared on the broadcast. This so-called engineer didn't look like any mechanic I've ever seen. I suspected she was a corporate diversity hire trying to bypass security protocols. The airline is blowing this out of proportion to push an agenda. The plane was perfectly fine. She was just being hysterical. Jenkins thought going on the offensive would save him. He thought playing the victim would force the Port Authority to back down. He was dead wrong. By going on television and publicly claiming that a critically grounded Boeing 777 was perfectly fine, and that he had intentionally delayed an aviation engineer from accessing it, Jenkins had unknowingly handed federal investigators the exact confession they needed. At 2 p.m. that afternoon, while Maya was still in the corporate offices, a team of serious men in dark windbreakers walked into the local precinct. The letters printed in bright yellow on their backs read, FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. Lead federal investigator Robert Lawson did not mess around. When a commercial airline jet is involved in an AOG emergency, the area around that aircraft becomes heavily regulated federal jurisdiction. Lawson walked straight into Captain Brenda Hollis's office. He didn't just want Jenkins' badge. He wanted his freedom. Captain Hollis, Lawson said, dropping a thick stack of telemetry printouts and a USB drive onto her desk. I have the CMCS black box data from Flight 492, the cockpit voice recordings of Captain Pendleton declaring an active pneumatic pressure emergency, and the passenger video footage. I suspended him last night, Investigator Lawson, Hollis said, leaning back in her chair. Internal Affairs is already processing his termination. Termination isn't going to cut it anymore, Lawson replied coldly. Mr. Jenkins went on national television this morning and openly admitted to intentionally obstructing an authorized aviation mechanic during a critical dispatch phase of a commercial flight. Lawson pulled a federal warrant from his jacket pocket, under 49 U.S. Code 46504, interfering with flight crew members and attendants, which extends to critical maintenance personnel operating under a direct captain's order, is a federal felony, Lawson stated. Jenkins didn't just harass a woman. He maliciously delayed the repair of a critical engine component, which placed the structural integrity of a heavy aircraft, and 340 lives in jeopardy. Within the hour, federal marshals arrived at Bradley Jenkins' suburban home. The local news helicopters, already circling like vultures due to the viral video, caught the entire thing live. Jenkins, the man who had arrogantly demanded Maya drop her tool bag and submit to his authority, was marched out of his front door in handcuffs. He looked pale, terrified, and utterly broken. There was no smirking now. There was no hiding behind a badge. He had picked a fight with a brilliant engineer, a billion-dollar airline, and the federal government all at once. And he had lost everything. He would lose his pension, his career, and likely spend the next 3 to 5 years in a federal penitentiary. Back at O'Hare, the sun was beginning to set over the massive, sprawling tarmac. The ice storm had cleared, leaving the sky a brilliant, crisp orange. Maya Reynolds stood at the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the Terminal 2 Executive Lounge, sipping a cup of coffee. She wore her new corporate security badge, a solid gold stripe indicating executive tarmac clearance. Below her, a brand-new Boeing 787 Dreamliner was pushing back from the gate. The ground crews moved with absolute precision, the massive engines spinning to life in a flawless symphony of engineering and power. Maya took a slow, deep breath, watching the jet taxi toward the runway. She had faced the absolute worst of human ignorance, and she had dismantled it using nothing but her intellect, her unshakable composure, and the undeniable truth of her competence. She was the aircraft engineer on duty, and nobody would ever doubt it again. And that is exactly how you handle a bully with a badge. Maya's incredible composure under fire not only saved her airline hundreds of thousands of dollars, but exposed a corrupt officer to the entire world, leading straight to federal charges. This story is the ultimate proof that you should never underestimate someone based on their appearance, especially when they hold the keys to a $70 million jet. If you loved this story of epic karma and professional revenge, smash that like button. Share this video with your friends to spread Maya's incredible triumph, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable real-life drama and insane revenge stories. Tell us in the comments, what would you have said to Officer Jenkins when he demanded your badge? See you in the next video.